Hello, good morning. So far, I think it's only Vincent. Welcome to the webinar. I hope you can hear me. Would be nice if you can write a quick yes or no, so I know that everything is working. We'll be waiting for probably a few minutes to see if anybody else comes online. But yeah, if you can hear me, Vincent, please send a quick message confirming that the voice is getting transmitted. Okay, wonderful, great. I want to apologize. I'm a little bit sick, so if I need to cough in between or drink my tea, so please bear with me. I will do my best so you can hear my voice clearly and there's not too much disruption. As we are waiting for people probably to still join in, if they are not joining in, then Vincent, you will have a private webinar, which is also nice, I think. As people are joining in, I would just go quickly through the things we will discuss today. So the content of today's webinar. As I mentioned already in the invitation, I don't want to last it for too long. It should just be a quick follow-up. We will talk a little bit about a coaching technique that some of you have mentioned in your feedback forms, talking about how to ask questions and how to basically include the questions into the games and how to approach the children in the right way when it comes to the discussions. So we'll talk a little bit about that. You will have the opportunity to ask questions about the first months of creating games. We'll just give you a short reminder about the SSP libraries and how to use them. And if necessary, I can also give them some further explanation about that. And then, as always, the summary will contain the tasks for October. I'm still thinking about waiting for a few more minutes, but it seems like for now it's only you and me, Vincent. Okay, I think we will just move on. If people join in late, then I think they will be able to catch up with us. Just briefly, some statistics about the online education program in September. The monthly feedback form for August has been filled in by 7 people. If you look at the brackets, there's all the names are listed. So Vincent, your name is amongst the 7 who have filled it in. So thank you very much for that. And also the games that have been entered on SSP. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to look at them in great detail. I've just quickly looked at the statistics, and there were 12 new games entered from 6 different coaches. And again, Vincent, your name is amongst the 6 who have entered games. So thank you for that. And you will also receive feedback for your games. It has been on my list for the past 2 weeks, basically. But this week I'm not feeling that great, so I haven't been able to get to that. I've only done the most urgent things. I hope I will be able to get to it either still this week, today or tomorrow. But definitely next week you will receive feedback for games. And hopefully you have also received feedback from other coaches. If anybody implemented any of your games, I have forwarded you the feedback that they left on the Google feedback form and in the Google form in the feedback questionnaire. I forwarded all the feedback that I found on there. If you haven't filled in, which doesn't apply for you, Vincent, but if you haven't filled in, then please fill in the feedback form for August. The next monthly feedback form for September will be published latest by Monday, so next week Monday. So by then it will be good if you leave your feedback, submit your feedback for August, so you can then focus on the next month. I want, as I said in the invitation already, the main purpose of this webinar is to give you the space to ask any questions in regards to creating games. And yeah, you're also welcome to share any successes or difficulties or challenges. So Vincent, if you want, you can either type, or I can also try to make you a moderator. I don't know how fast the internet connection is. Then we can also speak instead of you typing. So please let me know what you prefer, or you simply type your questions and comments in the box, then I can react and try to answer or comment on that. Okay, cool. Yeah, then I would probably prefer that if you can write, if you have any questions about creating games, anything you want me to re-explain, anything you want me to show you again, any questions, can be in regards to how to create games, it can be in regards to sports session planner, it can be in regards to certain steps regarding creating games. Can also be any questions or feedback in regards to the implementation. So yeah, I will give you some time. No problem. And then I'll respond to your questions. Okay, making progressions. That's, I think, is an interesting question. I'm trying to now see if I can probably look at one of your games. Let me see. Oh. Okay, health and wellness conservation. Let me look at that one. Yeah, I'm looking just at your game, Health and Wellness Conservation, where you have basically first you play with no protection, so there's basically only the poachers, and yeah, people who are basically either hunting wild animals or taking the habitat away from them. So yeah, and then in the progression you have the protection. People, for example, from the like fence, you said, or rangers, for example, or educated people. So you have a great progression. I don't know if I can give general advice, but usually I would say a progression in a more general way would be like to make the solution visible in the game. And I think, Vincent, that's what you have done in this tag game about the conservation of wild animals. I think that is a great way to make the progression visible in the game. That's what usually progressions are about, to either like make the solution visible, or to basically find a different solution to the problem, that usually also, or to add additional challenge. If it's a game that like focuses on problem solving, for example, then you can add more challenges to it. If you remember it from certain games where we have the rules, then you can't use your hands, for example, or you can't like let's say you can't use certain parts of your body, or you can't go you can't use your voice, you can't use your language, you have to communicate without words. So that makes things more difficult. So that usually progressions are either about making the solutions visible, or it makes the game also more difficult, more complicated. You can also add, for example, more goals or more balls, or obstacles that can make the game also more difficult or more complex. Probably difficult is just a bit one-sided, so complex is probably the better word. So that the progression can be about that. I don't know exactly what you mean by to take a game further. I mean, it definitely should take a game further, in the sense of, as I said, either making the solution visible, or making it more challenging, making it more complex. I think that would be my general answer. But I think your game that I've just looked at, which is the animal conservation game, Health and Wellness Conservation, is a very good example in terms of like having a progression and making the solution visible in the game. And I also like that you use two different screens, so you can also see how it is different, and how the people who are like representing the protection are trying to protect the animals, basically act a little bit like goalkeepers. Yeah, that's good. As I'm looking at your game, I can also see that the naming of the game is kind of correct. If you could also add the name of your organization whenever you enter the games and whenever you name the games. So as I think explained previously, if you can use the pattern of your name, your organization, the name of the game, and the social theme of the game. So that would be helpful. And then one other feedback for you, Vincent, in regards to where to put the games. I've seen you using basically different platforms to put them in. There's different categories how you can save the games. You can save them private, club, public, or in the extras library. So you have 4 different options. I would like to ask you to always add them into the extras library, and I have now changed the name of the library. It's called Adapted and Created Games 2017. So if you could put all your adapted or also now especially created games in there, that would be very helpful and make it easier for me to find them. So yeah, that would be great. Cool, that's yeah, that's great, that's no problem. So I will talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. I just saw that David O'Byrne also joined us for the webinar, so thank you and welcome online. Yeah, I will move forward to the next slide, which is about the coaching technique. Unless David, if you have any questions, please type them. I will get back to them. We just spoke with Vincent about any questions or challenges or successes in regards to creating games in the past month in September. So if you still have any comments on that or questions, please type it. And then yeah, in the meantime, I will move forward and move on to the next slide. And we will talk about a coaching technique that has been brought up by a couple of people, talking about like how to ask the questions and when to ask questions, and also describing certain challenges that they are having. I will get into a bit greater detail and more detail about that a little bit later. For now, I'll just quote 2 statements from our coaching techniques that you can find in front of or at the beginning of each of our packets. And one important coaching technique that also relates to the aspect of asking questions is the so-called 80-20 rule, which means that at least 80% of the time your players are playing and only 20% explaining the rules and discussing the impacts of the game. Use progressions to learn through play and let the game teach the message. Yeah, so it is this rule of 80% should be playing, 20% should be talking, which I think also gives you an idea of like the role of asking questions and the discussion points. They are important, but more important is that the children and your players are able to play the game, and that we use the games in a way that they can learn from playing the game and not necessarily learning from talking. And the second aspect, or the second statement from our coaching techniques about asking questions, is stating, ask your players questions about the game instead of telling them about the social impact. Allow them to make connections between the game and life. So that is the purpose of the games, the purpose of the questions. That's why we also have them in these games, so they can basically make connections between the game and the life and their lives, and they can also encourage them to think for themselves and not just receive and replicate what a coach, for example, is telling them. So for now, I want to give you an example, or explain these 2 coaching techniques on an example. And I have simply now taken the game because it was on the top of my memory and top of my head, was in the game Inclusion of All, or also Massive for Child Rights. Sorry. which was part of the monthly curriculum that I just sent out. And I quickly want to go through the rules. If you remember from the game, it's 3 different zones. You have 2 teams, and it's a game to goal. So the goal of the game is to score a goal, which is basically quite traditional in that sense. But you have, as you see also in the diagram, you have 3 different zones, and the teams can have 3 different kinds of players. They can have defenders, midfielders, and attackers. And the teams can decide for themselves who will play in which position. So that can be a problem that they need to solve on their own. So you can have 2 teams and tell them, okay, now you decide how many defenders you want, or who will be the defender, who will be the midfielder, who will be the attacker. The only rule, it wasn't my intention, I'll go back. And the only rule is that the players are not allowed to cross the lines. So the white lines you see, here, that I'm pointing at, they are not allowed to cross. So the turquoise player here would not be allowed to move into the middle zone, or for example the black player from the defending area would not be allowed to move into the midfield area. Now anticipating that the black team is playing towards this goal and the turquoise team is playing towards that goal. Yeah, and then sorry, I have to drink something. Okay, so after you've explained these rules, then you just simply play, and that's it. So there's not much explanation. The explanation should be taking as long as I've just now talked, and that was probably like 2 or 3 minutes. So after you have explained these rules, let them solve their problem. They distribute their players into the different zones, which shouldn't take longer than 1 or 2 minutes either, and then you let them play. And I wrote here for at least 5 to 10 minutes. And I think what will happen during these 5 to 10 minutes, that certain players might cross these zones, so they might not stay in their zone. They might forget, or they might be so excited that they want to run and help the other person, but they are not allowed. So you can use these 5 to 10 minutes also to basically make them learn the rules. And I think that's also an important aspect, that you use the game in also to make them learn the rule. The players don't need to understand all the rules from the beginning to its greatest detail. Like a lot of coaches also try to avoid mistakes, and then they over and over explain the rules until really everybody has understood it. But that means you probably have to explain it for 15 minutes, because there will be always another question, and there will always somebody who is not listening. So you just start the game, and then as you play, they realize, oh, there's this rule, or I forgot that. Exactly. It happens everywhere. It happens with adults, it happens with children. People forget about the rules, they don't really listen all the time, and that's okay, that's normal. But we want them to play. So get into playing, and then the rules are getting understood, will get understood as the players are involved in the game. So after you have explained the rules and you have basically played for 5 to 10 minutes, then you stop the game. Okay, yeah, welcome Elvis. We're in the middle of the webinar. I hope you can just catch up with us. We are currently talking about the coaching techniques of how to ask questions in the game, and how to apply the 80-20 rule of 80% should be playing, 20% should be talking. So Elvis, I think you will be able to catch up with us. So after you have played the game for, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes, then you stop the game. And then depending on your depending on the size of the pitch or your voice, how strong your voice is, or how well the children and players are focused, you can either let the players come close to get their attention, or you can also let them stay where they are. If you just want to ask one or two quick questions and then play again, then it's sometimes also helpful to not let them come close, let them stay where they are. If you play on a bigger pitch, then obviously it's necessary that you use a loud voice and that you shout quite loudly so everybody can hear you and you get everybody's attention. So that's something you need to decide if you feel comfortable talking to them as they are standing in the distance, or if you want them to come close. And then you can ask some of the questions, and the asking questions shouldn't take more than 1 to 5 minutes. And I wrote 1 to 5 minutes because it can really be that short or that long. You can ask really 2 or 3 questions, quick questions, and then move on. So for example, you can ask, how do you like this game? Are you happy? How does it feel when you're not allowed to move freely? And get the response from 2, 3, 4 people. How does it make you feel? Do you feel free? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel safe? Somebody might probably say, yeah, it makes the game simpler for me. I don't need to focus about defense and attacking. I just play here in the midfield. You might get different answers. And you might also ask them, would you like to move freely? And some people might say, oh yeah, I really want to. I want to help my attackers, or I want to help my defenders. I want to also attack. I want to also defend. And some others might play, oh no, we want to continue to play like that. And then that might be also fine, and then you move on and then you play again. And then depending on these answers, you can then move on and say like, okay, cool, now everybody is allowed to move. And then if you have a lot of focus from the groups, then you can also ask questions that go a little bit deeper, like the questions that you can find under point number 8. Are there any groups in our community that are excluded from sport or religious gatherings, social events, political power? Are there any groups in our community that are separated, that are not mingling, that are not getting together, that are just staying in their sections, in their areas? It can be based on race, it can be based on religion, it can be based on, so many different things. It can be based on gender, girls and boys who are separated, different races that are separated. So if you want to get deeper into that conversation, then you can do that after the first progression. But if you feel like, oh yeah, they are so excited in the game, then just ask these a few simple questions that you can find under point number 7, and then that shouldn't take longer than 1 or 2 minutes, and then you continue playing with this progression of now everybody can move. And then I will get back to that, David. Thank you for asking a question. And then you play for another 5 to 10 minutes. And then you play with this progression. And optional is then at the end, you can ask more questions afterwards. So the questions that you can find under point number 8, you can also ask at the end of the game when you are done, and then you reflect a little bit more on and relate it to life. That is also an option. But that also shouldn't take longer, really shouldn't take longer than 5 minutes. And now to relate to the question from David, do I ever have the problem of them recognizing a link to a social aspect? It really depends on 2 things. It depends on the questions I'm asking, and I think that I will talk a little bit more about that later. It is also a very important but also difficult coaching skill to ask the right questions, to ask it in a way so people can like think in certain, I don't know how to put it, like to canalize, I would say, and to point them into a certain direction. Like I could also ask, I think it shouldn't be what I would call this Easter rabbit pedagogy, I call it something, or like Easter bunny pedagogy, where you basically try to hide the questions somewhere or the answers, and then and then the participants need to try to find them. Like you need to find the eggs on Easter Sunday. That's why I'm using this analogy. Like it shouldn't be like that. It's not a game of like, oh, I'm asking a question and now I want to see if you will find the right answer. That's not the purpose. I think it's, if I know I want to bring out a certain aspect, then I would ask more directed questions, like I do, for example, here. When you look at the question and the point number 8, it's quite specific. I can say like, are there any groups that are separated in our community? And if they're not coming up with anything, then I can say, do you think that people are probably separated based on race? Or do you know any places where girls and boys are not allowed to mingle? Or do you know any areas of life, let's say political power, that certain people can't reach? Are there any people separated based on their money and their financial means? And that's already then a little bit more directed, and then people can think, yeah, true, that could be, what is it? And then I can help them to think about different possibilities without telling necessarily the answer. They can think for themselves, and they can still have an opinion on them on their own, and say like, no, I don't think that there is a problem in that regard in our community. So that is one aspect. And then the other aspect of asking questions is to also be open for the group, what they are coming up with. That's why I also like to ask more general questions at the beginning to see what the people are coming up with, what the participants come up with, what the children come up with. And then if they are not coming up with any answers, then I ask more specific questions. So if I now say, for example, are there any groups in our community that are separated, that then don't interact with each other? And then people would say like, yeah, disabled people and not disabled people, they are quite separated. And then I would say, that's interesting. Can you explain a little bit further? So then I would go with this answer. And if they wouldn't come up with anything, then I would ask them more specific questions, as I have already explained. So I hope this answers your question, David. So in that sense, I wouldn't really say that I'm witnessing any problems, that they wouldn't be able to relate it to the social aspects, because if they don't come up with anything, then I would ask more specific questions. Okay, if there's any other questions, please let me know. So I hope this was now a little bit more clear, like how this 80-20 rule, like 80% playing, 20% talking, and this way of asking questions, how that applies to implementing the games. And now I have 2 quotes from 2 participants that also brought this topic to my attention. Jorge, who will probably be on the webinar this afternoon, has made a statement. He said, I cannot make good discussions because I play with children which are 7 years old, so they don't like very much this situation of not shooting the ball. Also, when one team wins, all the players want to shoot. We try to talk, but we can't get a good discussion. Maybe we have to explain better the game and try to explain from the beginning that this was a team game. I think that's a very helpful and interesting feedback. I really like that. And I want to comment on a couple of points that Jorge is mentioning in here. One thing is important to be aware of. The younger the children are, the less talking and asking questions should be part of the game. So 7 years old are like really young children. It's like grade 1, probably grade 2 children. So with them, most of the game, like there would be very, very little talking. And I wouldn't also ask questions like these questions that are going deeper, particularly and like about things about, I don't know really. It would depend on the group, but I think the aspect would be more than in general. Like if we look now for the if we look now at this game again, and I would play this game with 7 or 8 years old. I would ask more questions like, how does it feel if you are separated in your zone, and how does it feel if you can run to the other zone? What do you think you can do to help, like, that people can mingle and that we can work together as a team and that we are not separated? What do you think are behaviors that are like separate us and that make people separated? Do you think like using bad language or bad words that separates people and that can hurt people or put people into their boxes and into their zones? A little bit like this, I think that's how I would go. I wouldn't go that deep into deeper into the topic. So I would ask first less questions, and then I would also ask questions that are more relevant to that age group. So yeah, then the second comment I would have is that the problem that your children and players are bringing up is the most important one. Jorge is describing in his feedback that they also want to shoot all the time and that they don't want to talk. And when he tries to talk, then when the one team wins, then all the players want to shoot. So then that is fine. You don't need to force a discussion on them. If they are not feeling up to talking to them, if they are not feeling up to talk, then you just move on with the different progressions, and then you give them the challenge of learning the rules, as I explained before, like to develop a strategy to become better in the game. And if you have a problem with discipline, that children are just in general not listening and that they shoot all the time the ball and not even listening to you explaining anything, then you need to discuss that with your players, and then that is the focus you should have to try to solve and discuss this problem. Then you don't need to worry about certain social issues or like talking now about inclusion and inclusion of all. Like, you just leave that out. You deal with the problem that your players and that your children are bringing up. And also, as I think I already explained a little bit, the younger the children, the simpler the questions must be. So yeah, I think I talked about that, and also, as I said in my previous sentence, is to use the game for the children to learn the rules. Mistakes that the children are doing are learning opportunities, and I think, for example, with a group of 7 years old, it will be a challenge for them to understand the rules of that game. For example, with the zonal play, that children will be running from one part to the other and they will misunderstand. Then focus on that, and that's completely fine. That's like they are in an age group where it's probably more, I need to understand the rules, I need to understand how to play, I need to understand how to play as a team. And then this game teaches about that indirectly by introducing this rule that there's zones and you can't pass from one zone to the other. That's fine, and then use the game for the children to learn the rules. And let the mistakes happen. That's okay. Let them play and let them run from one zone to the other, and then stop the game and talk about that and say like, is that allowed? Can we do that? Where are you allowed to go? Where are you not allowed to go? And things like that. Okay, I have one more quote from Cassandra from Canada, who said her feedback was coach training and how to encourage. The question was basically, do you have any suggestions what we should focus on in the remaining 2 months of the online education program? And she said, coach training and how to encourage coaches to use the discussion questions we set up. I find often I give my coaches the plan and I'm not always sure that they do any of the discussion. So my feedback for that is, as I mentioned already before, to ask the right question at the right time is one of the most difficult parts of coaching. So it's a real coaching skill to be able to ask questions and to also find the right balance, as I said, between playing and asking questions. And if you feel that they are really into the game and playing, then don't take this energy away by giving a 5-minute break and talking to them, although they are really into the game. If you're an instructor and if you have coaches that you are mentoring, then at the beginning you probably need to assist your coaches by going with them through the game, anticipating what will happen and what will be an appropriate reaction. So when to ask the questions, which questions to ask, as I said before, depending on the age group that your coach is working with, to also probably design specific questions that will suit. So the younger the children, the simpler the questions. So as a coach, it's probably an important aspect to not just give them the plan and give them the game and say like, here it is, play. But if you see that they're struggling with asking the questions, you can make that a topic and ask them, okay, which questions would you ask? What do you anticipate to happen with this game? What do you anticipate to be some obstacles? What do you anticipate to be some challenges for your players? And what would be then the appropriate questions you would ask? So, and then the last feedback and the last comment on that would be that coaching and talking don't need to be clearly separated, but they can be intertwined in the game. So it doesn't need to be like, okay, I'm playing the game and then I talk afterwards for 10 minutes. No, you can play the game for 5 minutes, ask 2 or 3 questions, play again for 5 to 10 minutes, ask a few more questions, play again for another 5 minutes. So it doesn't need to be this like playing and then talking, which also a lot of coaches I see do. But I think it's much more fun also for the coach more difficult, but for the children more fun if they can play and then it's just a quick, like a spotlight of like a minute or 2 where you ask and point out certain things that you are witnessing as a coach. That's why it's so important to observe what's going on in the field. What do you see? What do you witness? What are the reactions of the players? What are some conflict? What are some problems? And then point them out and then help them to solve it and start to think for themselves and find solutions. Yeah, I hope this helps a little bit. And yeah, if you have any questions, I think that's it about the 80-20 rules and about asking the questions. If you have any comments or anything else that wasn't clear, please let me know and I will try to re-explain. Okay. Then I think I have only a few more short things to announcements basically, and then we are done for today. With the SSP libraries, I've mentioned it before to Vincent already. I have now renamed the one library and it's called now Adapted and Created Games 2017. So please, if you can enter all your created games into that library. So when you basically enter your game and then it's saved, and then when you go and click onto your library, your games, then you can change the sharing options. I've explained that already when we entered into the adapt stage. I don't know if anyone wants me to explain that on SSP now, then I can do that if somebody still doesn't know how to do it. If you know, then I don't need to go in further, like deeper into that. But please, yeah, I would like all the games to be in that particular library, which makes it then much easier for me to find it. Yeah, that sounds great. And we don't need to waste time with that. So yeah, the library that I've created now, or it's basically I renamed. The previous library was called Adapted Games, I think. I have now called it or changed it to Adapted and Created Games 2017. So yeah, please enter the games into that library. Okay, then it's just a brief overview of the tasks that you needed to do in September and October. Yeah, as I mentioned, Vincent, I think, has completed all the tasks for September. I'm not sure how many games you entered on SSP, how many games you created. I've seen at least one. I'm not sure if I missed another one. Okay, probably then I will check again. Cool, then that is done, and then the task for October is the following. To implement 2 created games from other participants with your team or students and give feedback via the questionnaire that I will then share at the end of October. So for now, you just need to choose 2 created games from other participants, implement them, write down your feedback, and then you can enter it into the questionnaire that will be shared with you by the end of this month. And then you can add your created game to the extras library, Adapted and Created Games 2017. If you haven't done it yet, if they are like still in private mode or in another library, please add that to that specific library. Answer the feedback questionnaire for September that I will be publishing latest on Monday, as I mentioned previously. And then the next webinar will be scheduled most likely only later in November. I wasn't planning to have another follow-up at the beginning of November, unless people really wanted to. I might also start a poll question on Facebook Workplace to see what people want to do. But otherwise, we will only have another webinar about the OEP, in regards to the OEP, towards the end of the course. Basically before the end, 2 weeks before the end of the course. So I wish you good luck for the next months, especially Vincent. I mean, Elvis, you are already a graduate, and David is more part of the program to do the research that is important for him and for his research project. So thank you very much for joining in, and good luck with implementing the games from the other coaches. And I'm looking forward to see your feedback. And as I mentioned before, I will also send you feedback, Vincent, for your games latest next week. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Elvis, and thank you, David. Thank you, Vincent, and for joining in. And good luck and have a good day. Talk to you soon. I can already announce that there will be another webinar from the virtual learning community where David will be presenting about the research in the sport for development sector, which might be very interesting for you as well. That will be scheduled for October 18th, so basically 2 weeks from now. Okay, thank you for the good wishes. I hope I will get better soon, and then we'll be in contact. Thank you and goodbye.